Hey everyone, George here with Wine Industry Network. Welcome to another episode of the Win Insider series where I get to talk to people from different roles in our industry. We get to learn a little bit more about them, get their perspective on some of the things that we're dealing with in the industry. Some of them I know, some of them I don't know, but hopefully when we're done, you're going to get to know them a little bit better. But today I have Chris Goblet, who is doing some incredible work championing one of the most surprising and really oldest wine regions in the country, New Mexico. Chris is the executive director of the New Mexico Wine and Grape Growing Association. And my friend, Chris, welcome, man. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks, George. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm honored to have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about New Mexico, but more than anything, to spend an hour of time with you uninterrupted. That is a rare opportunity.
No, I love it, man. Chris, help me remember, I'm trying to remember where we first met. Did we meet in Healdsburg or was it like a Wine America meeting? I can't remember.
It was at the other side of that desk. I think you're sitting at there.
Okay.
I got my job in May of 2016. And I think June of 2016, I was in Healdsburg meeting with some consultants doing a marketing and strategic plan for us. And I wanted to learn as much as I could about the industry. I found Wine Industry Network. I shot you off an email, and you must have been curious enough to go, well, what's this guy talking about? You gave me 45 minutes of your time to, pick your brain. And I basically landed at the epicenter of wine knowledge
Yeah, that's funny.
side of your desk.
That's right. You were working with the Tank Nels.
Yep.
Yeah,
Paul. Yeah,
they're
exactly.
awesome. They are great. Well, let's. So when I do these things, it's always fun for me to, even with people that I know, to learn a little bit more about their journey. And how they kind of wound up in the positions that they got into. And so we're going to do a little bit of that, and obviously we'll talk a little bit about what's happening with the New Mexico wine industry and your thoughts on how you see the things in New Mexico unfolding in the future. But let's start with your story. So talk a little bit about how you wound up being the executive director for the New Mexico Wine and Grape Growers Association.
Well, I've seen some of your other interviews, and you go dig deep back into personal history. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of harken back to my earliest wine memory.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the Midwest, basically all the Great Lakes states, spent a lot of time in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. And I remember I was 18, I was a senior in high school. I started working for an Italian restaurant waiting tables. I think it might have actually been the first Cucina Bravo in the country. And I guess in 1994, at an 18-year-old could serve wine, could deliver wine to a table. So I'm taking orders, I'm serving pasta, and I'm bringing Pinot Grigios, Chianti to the table. I grew up in a house. My dad is a banker, so surrounded by a lot of bankers, and bankers have lots of nice toys, right? They all drive their BMWs and their Porsches. My dad drove a Volvo, but nonetheless, I was introduced to a lot of folks who, sought the finer things in life, and so I had this idea in my head as a young man that, I was interested in things that were not very popular with young kids, like symphony orchestras and fine dining. And had a job there at this restaurant, got interested in, what I can't drink. I was in a very parochial environment growing up. So not a lot of people were having fun at my high school. And so I decided all of a sudden that I was going to figure out how to, as an 18-year-old, to start a wine collection, and started learning about the different wine styles. And I started kind of doing a little bit of research, and we could taste a little bit of the wine as part of our job. And I found an Italian fine specialty grocery store in Columbus, Ohio, and I became a regular customer. And I figured if I walked in and I knew a little bit about Chiantis and I knew about Montepulciano and threw around a couple of words, these guys might actually sell me a bottle.
Yeah.
And so I had a 25 bottle wine collection by the time I graduated from high school of Chianti. And my parents were like, if you want to spend your money bringing dinner and wine home, we're not going to stop you. So those were my first experiences with trying to buy wine as a kid and think I was pretty cool. I'd drink them at home with my family and, enjoy dinner. But that was kind of where it started. And then the very following year, I ended up at a small private college in Michigan called Hillsdale and became a German major. So I had a marketing degree and a German degree. And my
Okay.
German professor said, I'm going to take you to Würzburg and you're going to have a great time. We're going to drink wine. You're going to meet girls. It's going to be a great trip. Oh, you're going to learn German. Uh, and one of the experiences we had was they took us to do our first wine tasting in the Ratskeller underneath the town hall. So we're in this, 400-year-old building in the cave in the basement, and this guy's bringing around Sylvaners and Rieslings and Cabinets, and I'm 19. We're all sitting down there having a good time, and we stumble out up into the hot sun and realize we're a little tipsy, and it was a pretty good time. So I kind of got this really unique introduction to wine through traveling when I was in Europe in college. Uh,
Yeah.
Rode my bike through Bordeaux. I think I was 20 and just, rented a bicycle, got off at Haute Medoc, I think is where I got off. I'm not the best when it comes to all these regions and the varieties and styles, but I rode my bike to Chateau Pichon Longuevue and walked in the front door as a limousine full of Japanese businessmen pulled up, and I just got in the queue. They must have thought I was a translator or something, and I did a flight of tastings and got on my bike and got out of there before I had to pay for anything.
Oh my God, dude.
You know,
You're like the Ferris Bueller of wine. Like that's so funny. I love your strategy for getting underage served, like to go in there and start talking about some of your favorite vintages and stuff. That's fantastic.
yeah,
All right, well then, this is great because I didn't know any of this. Then, but then you wound up like running the Brewers Association in
yeah,
New Mexico.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like, I
So
need to get me to like. Then how do you get to New Mexico and you're running is it the Brewers Association like the
yeah, the New
association
Mexico
you're running?
Brewers Guild. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. So I finished my degree over in London, England, at Regent's College. Got my marketing degree over there. It was better than being in a cornfield in Michigan for a semester. And my whole family came back from living in London, and we decided that Ohio didn't quite fit who we were any longer, and we
yeah,
needed to change a pace. So my whole family, we drove out to New Mexico. Got into Santa Fe. My mom said, go home and get the furniture. This is our new home. And that was in 1999. So I was fresh out of college, didn't really want to jump into work too quickly. Got to mess around for a little while in New Mexico, hang out with my family. Got a job offer in New York City and spent some time in Manhattan, which is where my dad's from. Spent a couple of years there. That was fun, but got back to New Mexico in around 2003 and decided that there was a lot of rat race going on in the world. People were running fast and trying to make money and hustle. And New Mexico's just got a great pace of life. There's a reason why a bunch of people want to retire in Santa Fe. And I thought, why go through all of that effort of, working my butt off all these other places just to get back to a place like Santa Fe? I'll just make my career happen here. And it's been a great run for me. I've managed to find it's being a big fish in a small pond.
yeah.
There's only 2 million people who live in this state, and that means there's got to be opportunity somewhere. So I sniffed around and worked a little bit in radio, started doing event planning and promotion. There's a festival here called the Santa Fe Wine and Chili Fiesta.
Yeah.
And I thought it was awful snooty and uppity, and they had, expensive tickets and people flying in private jets. And I thought, we got this great craft beer scene here. Why don't I start the New Mexico Beer and Nut Festival and focus on all of the pecans, pistachios, peanuts, and pinon that we grow here? And for 2 years, I ran this festival until I sold it for $30,000. I thought I hit pay dirt. And and so that was 2005. Around then, 2006, did my beer fest and started working in a nonprofit. Cut my teeth in nonprofit administration. And the Brewers called me back in 2012 and said, "Hey, we're forming an association, a trade association. We have no money. Would you like the job?" And I said, "That sounds right up my alley." My wife at the time did not like this decision at all. So they said they could pay me $12,000 for the first year of work. And
Okay.
I quit my job. I went all in on this craft beer scene, knowing that there was this huge trajectory happening from around 2012 to about 2012. You really saw that craft beer was just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
And then the writing was on the wall. This thing is going to peak. If I want to get on the bus, I should do it now. So for 4 years, I got to run the Brewers Guild. I got to create everything from the logo, the website, the beer map. Got to do about a dozen festivals.
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody in New Mexico and across the United States was going gaga for beer.
Yeah.
I've got a great story. One of my wineries that I work for now ran into me. He was delivering wine to the farmer's market in Santa Fe. He said, "How are things going?" And I said, "Oh man, we're selling the beer as fast as we can make it." And he goes, "Well, that must be nice." And he was kind of pissed at me as he walked away and thought about, these dang brewers with all their popularity right now. And lo and behold, 2 years later, I'm the executive director for New Mexico Wine, and he keeps reminding me, "Hey, you need to get us to that point where we're selling the wine before we even got it on the bottle." So yeah, I stepped into the wine industry. I had forgotten all of these experiences I had growing up. I had forgotten about, going to Chianti and going to, Tuscany and traveling through France and drinking, wine in Germany. And so it kind of all started to come back to me, and I realized that this is something I'd been, doing
Yeah.
for a long time. And it wasn't a strange concept. In fact, as I looked at the New Mexico wine scene, I saw a lot of opportunity. I saw a extremely long, storied, authentic history of winemaking, and I saw a company called Grape, which I knew was well respected, made a quality product. People loved it from around the country. But I also recognized that New Mexico hadn't taken advantage of some of these assets that it had. And they very quickly convinced me. At first, I didn't want the job. I thought, no, these
Yeah.
guys
Did
are
they
gonna.
come after? Did they come after you? Did they recruit you? Did they?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
they
Okay.
recruited me. Yeah, my former board president called me up and said, "We want you to do for the wine industry what you did for the craft beer industry
Yeah.
in New Mexico." So I'd apparently made a big enough stink, and I'd been arrogant enough with what we were working on that people took notice. And I begrudgingly took this interview, and I thought, these guys don't know how to make good wine. I had
Yeah.
the same perspective that I think everybody has when you hear, wait, New Mexico wine?
Yeah.
Isn't it the desert? How is this possible? And I thought it was going to be a bunch of stuffy old doctors and lawyers and retired people, and that's not my jam. That's not my people.
Yeah.
And what I realized when I got in there is these were, multi-generational European families that were passing their wineries down to their kids. And so there was a fresh group of people coming in. There was some excellent history and knowledge and viticulture and enology. And they had a $250,000 grant that's what paid for me to come to Healdsburg and meet with the Tinknells. And I thought, well, I don't want to let anybody else spend this $250,000. I better take that and see what I can do with it. And one of the things I've learned about myself over the years is I love walking into a clean slate.
Yeah.
Whether it's an organization that's starting from the ground up and you get to be the first to make your imprint, or
Yeah.
whether it's an organization that's changing and transitioning and they've seen the writing on the wall. Well, New Mexico wine growers have been around since 1991.
Okay.
They had split into two separate factions, the North and the South, that were trade associations doing the exact same thing, but they had, there was discord between. It's a
Yeah.
big state. You can understand people in the North are 4 hours from their
Yeah.
folks in the South. And they had just reunited the two organizations the year before I arrived. And so I really saw at this opportunity, a lot of the hard work had been done already. You got everybody on the same page, on the same team. Now they need a vision, they need a direction. And I thought this was an opportunity for me to use my experience in traveling, foreign language,
Yeah.
seeing the world, and then my nonprofit experience that I already had gathered to give these guys a leg up and show them what was possible.
Was it a big difference? So you had all this great success with the is it the Brewers Guild? Is that how you
Yep.
refer to Brewers Guild?
Yep.
Um, and so I get leaving must have been, a little bit daunting, right? Because now it's something new, but it's wine. is there a big difference between running the Brewers Guild in terms of like, I mean, I know it's beer versus wine, but in your role as an executive director, was it really different, or is it not that much different?
Well, I'll say the number one difference is there's way more money in wine than there is in beer. A startup nonprofit in 2012 versus, 39, let's see, it's 44 years now, I guess the association's been running. I'm sorry, 34 years the association's been running. So, there was just a lot of established infrastructure there that I could step into, and I think
Yeah,
that helped a lot. Yeah, that audiences are different. I think I've had to change. Um, Here's a great example. My graphic designers were a bunch of beer drinking boys. And so
yeah,
when I was working with the Brewers Guild, it was so easy to come up with a new poster. You could basically put a cowboy hat, a top hat, any kind of hat on top of a beer glass or a can, and you had yourself a hot, fresh poster.
yeah,
We were coming up with crazy, audacious ideas that worked really well for a predominantly male-driven audience. Now here I am working in wine, and our demographic is extremely different. It's almost a 180-degree difference in
yeah,
terms of who our New Mexico audience is. I mean, our number one audience is a female Hispanic woman. From 24 to 44 years old,
yeah,
and so definitely the way in which we present our industry and we want to speak to people. Um, Craft beer had that moment of just sheer excitement. You almost didn't have to do anything.
right.
And I know where we are today in wine, we've had to do a lot of soul searching and look at how are we speaking to our customer? What are we going to convince them the value proposition is of wine moving forward. So, yeah, I definitely think there are challenges and differences. When everything is sunshine and prices are going up and everyone is buying and buying, it's real easy to be on the bandwagon. I think it becomes a lot more difficult, and this is for beer and wine and spirits today. When all of a sudden, there's a couple of clouds in the sky, you've got to really think about what it is that's going to set you apart, whether that's an individual, winery or an industry or a region.
Yeah,
And so I think that's the challenge that I get excited about now is I never thought running New Mexico wine was going to be easy, but I also knew that there were enough assets, there were enough positives
yeah,
that if I could figure out how to tell a better story and present the information, in a lot of ways, it's convincing my own wineries that we have the value and the worth that, the stories that people say about us when the wine in the 80s was terrible, and it was,
yeah,
but they've said that in every region, and every region has an opportunity to expand and grow. And I see that the opportunities that I have in wine are so much more diverse and varied.
yep,
And I feel like, whether it's with wine and food, with wine education, there's just a lot of ways that I think we can position our industry to succeed. And that's the part that I find exciting.
Well, it's a good segue because I want to dive into the New Mexico wine scene and the history. And so, because we're friends, I've learned some things about about the history of wine being produced in New Mexico and how long it's been. But I think a lot of people don't know about the history of wine in New Mexico. So, talk a little bit about that.
All right, so the story goes, the Spanish were shipping wine on donkeys basically from Mexico up into New Mexico and the territories. And they would have to ship it from Spain, put it on a mule, run it up the street, the old Santa Fe Trail.
Yeah. What year is this? No, like go what
Oh,
this is
this
like
is so 1560. So we're
yeah,
talking about 1560s. If you go back to the oldest winery in Mexico and Parras region, you've got, wines established in Mexico in that era.
crazy.
The first grapevines, they quote unquote said they were smuggled up here. I'm pretty sure it wasn't that hard to smuggle them in 1629 over the non-existent border. But two friars, Franciscan friars, a Capuchin monk and a friar, brought, this bundle of grapevines up to a mission south of Albuquerque and planted the first sticks in the ground in 1629. So right now we are in the process of planning for our 400th anniversary of winemaking in America. So the America's oldest vineyards are in New Mexico. And as we are starting to put sort of put some marketing magic around this, we're referring to it as Vintage 400,
Wow.
which will be in 2029. So we've got 5 years to go. And we are all here getting excited and preparing for what the anniversary looks like and what comes after that. But if we want to just kind of rifle through 400 years of history, I think it was 1629, 1632 was the first vintage of wine that was actually released to the parish. Um, then you have all in the 1770s, you've got a lot of proliferation of wine up and down the Rio Grande, basically anywhere from Las Cruces or El Paso to north of Albuquerque. You actually have tribal nations that are growing grapes. So you've got pueblos that have been hired, and they were paying a wage to have folks come and prune and harvest. It has led a pueblo. I've got a great article from Harper's Bazaar in 1885 that talks about a woman taking a train from El Paso to Denver and stopping off near Isleta to have a bottle of wine with a French winemaker. And so throughout the years, you've had this sort of ebb and flow of an industry that was wiped out through, war and conflict, the uprising, the Puebloan uprising. You've
Hmm.
got floods in the Rio Grande happening, every 100 years, wiping out the entire industry,
Yeah.
and then getting replanted. Um, Right around 1883, Christian Brothers set up their production in Bernalillo County and produced wine in New Mexico through 1935, I want to say. And so you had additional sacramental wine that was being made from the 1800s throughout Prohibition. So there was
Yeah.
no end of wine production during Prohibition because sacramental wine was coming out of Bernalillo. And a fun fact I just read the other day is that, we're not the most agreeable folks when, you know, the federal government comes in. We had just become a state in 1911 and they come in with prohibition. And so New Mexico grape plantings doubled from 1920 to 1930 doing prohibition. So a lot of home wine was being made. But the arrival of the refrigerated train car is what pretty much crippled the New Mexico wine industry. Let's see, in 1890, we were making about 1 million gallons of wine a year, and we were the fifth largest wine production state in America.
Wow.
And by 1910, there was less than 2,000 gallons produced.
Why did that ruin the? How did the refrigerated car,
Well, because
impact?
by that time, California, y'all had figured out how to do this much better,
Okay.
much cheaper, and at much grander scale. And so once the railroad station was built in Albuquerque around 1900, 1905, you start to see refrigerated train cars coming in. So they could refrigerate wine,
Gotcha.
transport it, and basically California wine in the 1900, in the first 15 years, 20 years, of the 1900s dominated and took over, and it's never changed since.
Oh, that's
So
so interesting.
it pushed us out of the market. And it wasn't until 2018 that we produced over 1 million gallons of wine again. So
Wow.
it's been again, been a bumpy road up and down. Um, and yet there's so many layers of this that we get to peel back over the next 5 years to kind of share this story. And thank you for letting me share it. But basically, that is the crux of my Vintage 400 concept. Is
Yeah.
to take the greatest story in wine in American wine history that's never been told or never been properly shared and bring that to the attention of people across the country and then globally, of course.
That's fascinating, and I didn't know any of that. You mentioned earlier, like sometimes part of the job is not only convincing, the consumers that, hey, we make pretty good wine here in New Mexico, especially the people who live in New Mexico, right? Like we
Yeah.
should support our backyard. But you said something about, sometimes you need to convince your the wineries and the growers that you work with go, hey, we could do a good job, guys. Like, let's. So how does that come out? Like, what do you mean by that? Like, and what do you do?
Well, I mean, some of it is natural. There's the hobby winemakers who we've seen some attrition, them moving out of the market. I
Yeah,
guess somewhat of a benefit of a downturn is the people who weren't taking it seriously see the fact that the wine sales are decreasing and they decide it's time to get out. So there's been some just general change in the demographic. We have these two major laboratories, Los Alamos National Labs and Sandia Labs that are both here in New Mexico.
hmm,
And there's a lot of scientists, a lot of, well-paid chemists and biologists who retired and started wineries in the 80s and 90s. And again, it was a retirement project.
yeah,
And what I've been trying to do is professionalize the industry and show everybody that, I know that I can deliver the marketing message and I can get our name and our brand out there. But unless the quality is matching the messaging, there's going to be a disconnect when the consumer actually arrives.
yeah,
So it's been a lot of things. First, it was creating a brand that I could get everybody's attention around, something that was sticky and got some excitement. So the first thing I did was created the Viva Vino wine brand. Viva Vino is sort of like it's our battle cry. It's our toast. When we get together and raise a glass, we all say Viva Vino and salud, right? So it's this idea of live wine, celebrate wine, and
yeah.
everything in New Mexico has a Viva in front of it. So it was a pretty easy ad. Um, and so I started making just, merchandise. We had t-shirts and hats, and we got people just kind of
Yeah,
running around buying in every single wine glass for our festivals, Viva Vino. So reinforcing the brand and this identity that we are all in this together, and we want people to live the wine life with us. So that's sort of a internal and an external communication piece. The next step has been building up the education. And as I well know from, what's been accomplished at UC Davis, Washington State, Oregon State, Cornell, it takes a land grant university with a
yeah,
dedicated wine education system in order to be successful. So I've worked with our legislature and New Mexico State University, and I'm proud to announce that literally as of March, we have rehired our viticultural position. She's a grad from Prosser under Dr. Marcus Keller. So a graduate of Washington State University, originally from the Canary Islands. And
okay,
interestingly enough, those first grapes that they planted in New Mexico were mission grapes. And one of the largest produced grape varieties in the Canary Islands is the Mission grape, is Pais. So I'm really excited to hear what Geraldine has to say about Mission grapes moving forward. We just hired an enologist from Cornell. He's coming out starting April 21st.
okay,
Then we have a third food scientist whose focus is in flavor and color profiles and maintaining those. He starts on August 21st. So we are going to have three people. This will be the most faculty we've ever had in extension services and faculty that are going to come in from a scientific side and work on things from NMSU. And then up in Albuquerque area, we worked with Central New Mexico Community College to build a $10 million wine production facility. And it is a gem. It is spectacular. We have now finished our second education boot camp with Tim Donahue, who was up
okay,
in Walla Walla, Washington. And Tim's been down now to do two boot camps. Our third one is coming up in July. It's going to be a full, solely focused on sparkling wine production. So we've been investing heavily in this education component, pushing our members to go to Unified and to get out and to explore the rest of the world.
yeah,
I put on, I would call it a marginally successful wine education conference,
okay,
but we do bring, folks. Just recently, we focused our conference on Central Coast, and so we brought out a bunch of folks from Cal Poly,
okay,
which was great. We learned a lot about what's happening in SLO and Paso Robles. And so I think it's just a lot of different pieces moving in tandem, trying to
yeah,
keep those things all moving forward so that you really don't even give your members the opportunity to second guess your success. If
yeah,
you can just keep stacking on top, the next great opportunity, you open their eyes to, what can we do that we've never been able to do before? And then you go do it. They just
Yeah.
keep believing that there's nothing that's going to stop us.
Well, you're
So,
like manifesting this is fantastic. A little plug for Cal Poly. My youngest just graduated there last year. That's a great school. That's a good partnership for you. So is this all part of the Vine Fund? Because you work really closely with your state government that supports the industry. So is that what it's called? It's the Vine Fund that helps. Talk a
yeah.
little bit about that because I think for the folks that are involved in our associations, and I love the associations, I think they play just a huge role in our industry. I don't care where you are, what state or what county you're in. But talk a little bit about the Vine Fund because I love how much support you have. I mean, that's unbelievable.
So, post-pandemic, right? Everyone remembers those glory days. Our governor, and I'm going to say something bad about her, but I'm going to follow it up with something good in case she's
Okay.
watching.
Yeah.
Everyone was frightened during the pandemic, so wineries were considered, bars, and we were shut down for 145 days, couldn't open our doors. Um, and so that took a real toll on us. And I came out of the pandemic looking for opportunities to kind of reinvigorate the industry, and sat down with one of our senators from southern part of the state where we grow a lot of grapes. And we presented this idea of $2 million to replant 400 acres of New Mexico vines. And it turns out she was successful. She went to the legislature and they only gave us $1 million, but only giving $1 million to plant vines was kind of like only the other time it's ever happened. So we were pretty pleased with that success. Um, we had to jump through a lot of hoops. I'll say this, it probably broke a few laws in the state of New Mexico, one of them being the anti-donation clause. But, coming out of the pandemic, they were looking to stimulate industry and get things moving forward.
Yeah.
So we encumbered the funds through New Mexico State University and basically paid farmers to plant grapes. So for every vine you put in the ground, we would reimburse you up to $5.
Wow.
So it was a combination of replanting what had been lost between 2018, 19, 20, 21, like anything that had died back that farmers wanted to replant.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it was for new plantings and expansion of vineyards. So at the end of this, it was a 3-year grant period. It was $1 million total. We basically broke it into thirds. And it was also retroactive, which was great because it was 2022. We got the
Okay.
funds in July, and I was able to reimburse $280,000 worth of vines in the first year of the program. And as soon as all this happened, everybody started calling Inland Desert and Knight's Nursery and Sunridge. And so the next year, we had $380,000 worth of plantings. I think total now 255,000 grapes were planted.
Wow.
950,000 were spent because there were some administration fees that were in there.
Yeah.
8 new vineyards were established. And I think we benefited or supported 35 different farmers. So it really it got everybody excited again and motivated. And whether you were planting 20 acres down in southern New Mexico, or you needed 180 vines to replant your demonstration vineyard out in front of your winery, it didn't matter. As long as you bought the sticks and put them in the ground, we
Yeah.
gave you $5 back. So it was just, again, it was a bit of a windfall, but it was what we needed coming into 2022, 3, 4. Again, it was one of those successes that
Yeah.
just we needed to know that our legislature believed in us, and we just finished the economic impact study on this. We will pay back the full $1 million to the state in 7.7 years.
Wow.
So in that time frame, the full $1 million will be completely re-encumbered to the state through excise tax and sales tax. And over the life of the vines, it should generate about $15 million for the state. So,
That's a great investment, right?
I mean, how many times do you get to invest in agricultural crops
Yeah.
where you get paid back within, in less than a 10-year period of time? And so the value added process for wine makes all of this possible. Yeah, so it's a feel-good bill. I think the legislators feel really good about it.
Yeah.
But it was proof to us that we could, implement this crazy idea that we just threw out to one senator. And I will say it is not as easy in every state um, to walk into the Capitol and ask for $1 million and get
Yeah.
it on the first try. So we've got a very different structure. All of our legislators are volunteer, so none of them get paid. And you literally walk straight into the roundhouse, down onto the floor to their desk, and you can talk to any senator or representative you want face to face until the gavel strikes. And that degree of access and entry is what I commonly refer to as what's uniquely New Mexican. You know,
Yeah. I
so
wish there was more of that. Well, talk to me then about the $10 million wine production facility, like the 10 million, is that? That's can't be coming from your membership dues.
oh no, that's state. So we went to the legislature with our community college. I have to give me a sip of water here.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to go back to the Brewers Guild.
Yeah.
Back when I was the beer director, CNM, Central New Mexico Community College, came to me and said, "This beer thing has taken off. We had just launched a food truck institute at CNM where they were teaching people how to run food trucks. They said, we have a culinary program. We want to get into craft beer production. It looks like there's an opportunity for us to create some educated students here." So what is this? Back in 2013, we raised $1 million from our legislature to start the beer college, right? The craft beer school. And since then, they've graduated over, I think, 400 students. They've won 200 medals at craft beer competitions. It's just been an amazing program that's placed, capable workforce into jobs both in New Mexico and out of state. So my partner in crime over at CNM, Victoria Martinez, came to me and said, "We want to do wine and distilled spirits, and we want to build a $10 million facility on campus, world class, so that we can replicate our success with craft beer in distilled spirits and wine." Education is a key element of what our legislature invests in. We are lucky enough to have oil and gas revenues that keep us flush with money.
Yeah.
And there was very little arm twisting in order to get this. We had proven success with the Beer Academy. And so they basically, said, "Well, if you can do that with beer, I'm sure you can do it with spirits and wine. Here's your money." Took 4 years to build this. I think they got the money in 2018. And I think we opened the facility in 2023.
Okay.
And we've been struggling to get the wine program off the ground until we met Tim Donahue. And I reached out, I flew him down to New Mexico. I called him on August 22nd of 2024. And I said, "We want to launch a red wine boot camp this harvest. Can you do it?" And he said, "What are you talking about? That's 6 weeks. We have 6 weeks to do this." And in 6 weeks, we managed to get grapes shipped in from Washington State, from Inland Desert, from Kevin Junkus. We brought 4 open top fermenters from Walla Walla Community College. Basically, Tim had purchased those and brought them with him. We got CNM to order wine barrels. We registered 14 students. We got a grant from our city to pay full tuition for all 14 students. So we created our first red wine boot camp, and we made a Petit Verdot, Cab Sauv, a Merlot, and a Malbec. And all of those are going to be bottled this July, and they'll be for sale at my wine bar that we opened last year, which we can talk about next.
Yeah.
But the full circle here is the college makes the wine, it gets transferred to New Mexico Wine and Bond. We sell the wine, and then $5 from every bottle goes back to support the education program at CNM. So the second boot camp happened at the end of February, beginning of March. We did a Riesling. We did a sparkling Riesling and a still Riesling. And we made the base wine for the sparkling boot camp that will be in July. In the meantime, CNM received a $2 million grant to pay for every student to go through the Wine Academy for the next 2 years, whether they're from New Mexico or not.
No shit.
So we now have the ability, if somebody wants to come learn about sparkling wine production for free of charge, come to New Mexico for a 10-day, 2-week intensive boot camp, and you get to go to Grape, you get to meet Laurent Grape, you get to sparkle up some bubbles, you get to play with our little centrifuge, disgorge, bottle, and then all of that wine will go back to New Mexico Wine, we'll sell it, and then we'll create more boot camps. So it's these self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Like you said, you manifest your own successes. And I think it's just been, well, pure luck, right place, right time. And then
Yeah.
just a lot of bravado that, nothing's going to stop us from getting to our end goal. Because all of these things have to happen in order for that 400th anniversary to actually be a success.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Well, you're
mean, I
doing it.
need,
Well,
I need to do
talk,
all of it.
talk about the wine bar.
Okay. So the Viva Vino Wine
This is
Studio.
another thing I think is amazing. You're crazy.
So my board, after the pandemic, realized that all of our revenue comes from festivals, and we sell over $1.2 million in festival tickets every year to our major events, Memorial and Labor Day. And that funds all of our programs. And we're so grateful we started those in 1993 because that's our cash cow. But when the
Yeah.
pandemic came, we were stuck and we had no revenue. We ran we ran a fundraiser called Grape Aid. And Grape Aid was intended to raise $100,000 to support wine growers. And what we did is we created a 1 day, oh, it's so embarrassing. I'm on video camera all day long. We had musicians performing music, and during the full day of concerts that we presented, we had wine from all 50 of our wineries available for sale on this website.
Okay.
And we were able to sell $75,000 worth of wine in 1 day. That all that money went straight to support our wineries who had been shuttered, who were closed at that time. So my board said, well, if you can sell $75,000 worth of wine through this funny little promotion called Grape Aid, maybe we should diversify our revenue stream and open a tasting room. By the way, everybody has said, do not open a tasting room.
Right.
I mean, I've heard it from the folks at the Lodi Grape Growers Association. Jim Treesize from Wine America said, don't do this. We tried it in New York, it failed. But there's a great statement from the territorial governor of New Mexico in 1881. Governor Lew Wallace said, all calculations based on experience elsewhere fail in New Mexico. So if you think something works somewhere else and you're going to bring it here, it's going to fail. And yeah, maybe he was right in 1881. Maybe these days it's a little better. But I think the same is true if you flip the statement around.
Yeah.
Things that happen in New Mexico are hard to replicate elsewhere. So we filled out one of those USDA grants. We got 250,000, we got 164,000 in matching dollars from the federal government to open a tasting room with the goal of representing 50 wineries and selling, I think we said we'd sell $200,000 worth of wine in the first 2 years.
Yeah.
Took a long time to get through licensing, but we are licensed as a New Mexico winery through the TTB and through the state. We opened our doors October 1st, the first day of the Balloon Fiesta in Albuquerque. We're based in Old Town, which is the historic district that was basically back in 1890. There were 15 wineries in Old Town Albuquerque. And since then, there have been zero. But we got our license. And so we are now the first licensed winery in Old Town Albuquerque. We have 27 wineries we represent. And I wouldn't say that storefront retail is any executive director's idea of a good time,
Yeah.
but we're learning. Just today, we're putting together the ultimate New Mexico wine club. And so I'm working right now on creating our wine club for 2025 to launch, where we'll feature wines from across the state. We'll have those student wines from CNM. And the next big crazy goal is we're going to start manufacturing our own private label, some of that through using existing New Mexico bulk wine. And the next phase will be to have custom made wines for the wine growers. We'll do a southern wine, a northern wine, collaboration wines. We'll use this as a way to move additional products. It's a tourism center, so people can fly into Albuquerque, drop by the tasting room, and plan their trip to any one of our 50 wineries. It's a wine bar where you can do tastings, and it's cost a lot of money. But, it's another one of these ways that if we're going to advertise come to New Mexico and I'm a virtual office at my house,
Yeah.
you have no destination to drive people to but a website. And it's
Yeah.
hard to connect with a website to create an emotional connection. And we thought a storefront would be a good way for the 400th anniversary as your wayfinding. Come in to Albuquerque, you fly in, you go to Old Town, which is on the most tourists stop anyway, have a
Yeah.
glass of wine, and we'll point you in the right direction.
Are you guys making some money in there? We selling some wine? No?
No, no. January and February were terrible. It was miserable. But in March, we made $1,000 in March. So
Okay. You're on your way.
we're in the black, and festival season's right around the corner. And so we're giving ourselves a year to get this thing really dialed in and figure out the special sauce that'll make it sing.
Well,
But
I know you'll do it. I mean, I like the idea of having the ultimate New Mexican wine club, or I think that's what you call it. I think that's like the gift that keeps on giving, once you get it going. So I think that's cool. So I want to, this is awesome, fascinating. Um, as an industry, we talk a lot about we need to do a better job of connecting with, new consumers. I don't want to say young because it's not just young; it could be just the wine curious. But what do you think about that? And are you guys doing anything different or special that's specifically designed to engage with younger consumers?
Well, as I mentioned, our festivals, we already have a very strong foothold in the marketplace. In Albuquerque, we get 15,000 people Memorial Day weekend, average age 21 to 41,
Okay. Okay.
predominantly female, right?
Yeah.
So 60-40, 70-30.
Yeah.
In Las Cruces, our festival gets around 14,000 people Memorial Day weekend. 70% of that audience comes from El Paso or Mexico,
Okay.
predominantly Hispanic. So
Yeah.
the demographic that people are talking about, or one of the demographics that people are talking about, Hispanic females, younger skewing, we already do that. And it's sort of our bread and butter. We are a bit of a gateway for wine drinking in New Mexico. The Santa Fe Wine and Chili Fiesta board came to one of my presentations and they said, "How are you getting young people?" And I said, "Well, it's $25 to get a ticket to our festival, and it's $194 to get them to your event. So
Yeah.
maybe it's the price point,
Yeah.
but we are very much fun. Our brand, we changed our name from the New Mexico Wine and Grape Growers Association to Viva Vino, New Mexico Wine.
Yeah.
So we talk about our product when we talk about ourselves. One of our new initiatives is a Spanish language passport program. So
Okay.
we take the concept of a passport, you just get stamps, it's nothing new, but
Yeah.
it's entirely in Spanish. It's a Pasaporte del Vino, and it's being distributed in El Paso and Juarez. And so what we're focusing on is we've done a terrible job of having a bilingual marketing and advertising campaign. So moving forward into 2025 and in the next 5 years, we're going to definitely lean heavier into something that we just take it for granted, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's more Hispanic people in New Mexico than there are not. We're a minority majority state and everyone's bilingual, but
Yeah.
there's just, I think, a lot more opportunity for making things fun. There's a lot of word play, but this is going to require us hiring new, marketing agencies and people to help us to actually come up with creative translations and creative word usage to make it more appealing and more available. Um, but I think, we are there's two great things about the 400th anniversary. Nobody knows the story. Nobody knows New Mexico makes wine outside of New Mexico unless you drink Gruet, and many of you do. Thank you. Um, but we need to tell the bigger story of
Yeah.
what New Mexico's, you know, our potential is, and we need to get back into being an export state. Wine
Yeah.
was our third largest export in the 1800s. Why can't we triple our exports? And oh, by the way, I think New Mexico, I think Grape exports 300,000 cases a year alone. So if we could export 600,000 cases, we'd be that much better off telling our story and making our products available to people at their doorstep. Right now, the big request is you got to come to New Mexico to experience the product.
Yeah.
The benefit of that, you get to come to New Mexico and experience the beautiful scenery, the mountains, the skiing, the balloon fiesta, the cuisine, the culture. So it's a good value added proposition for the intrepid traveler and the exploratory drinker. We call them the liquid tourists to come to New Mexico and experience something completely different, completely unexpected. And if I'm doing my job, when you get here, you won't be disappointed.
Well, that's so interesting. It was funny. I was at a wine market council. They do like their annual presentation, and obviously a big part of what they do are looking at our wine consumers and when there's opportunities or where there's opportunities, and identifying the Hispanic community was, I think, the biggest opportunity that they've identified. And so that's really interesting that's already sort of a core consumer for New Mexico wine producers. And perhaps maybe that's I mean, you guys are all, I'm sure, already thought about this, but perhaps that's your angle, right? When you start looking to export, who are you exporting to? You're not trying to export 10 million cases. You don't have, but so you can be very a targeted, laser-like in who you go after. So that'll be interesting. Well, I'm excited for you, man. I think, was it called Vintage 400? Is that what we're calling it? Vintage 400? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so the opposite side of this is where do we need traction? And it's the same with any emerging region. I remember I heard you and Dr. Liz Taich, is that how you say her name?
Tosh.
Tosh.
Yeah.
She lived in New Mexico. I should
Yeah.
get her back out here to have some fun with us.
You should get her back up. She's awesome. She was obviously the person who led the conference yesterday.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think our biggest uphill battle is with the wine savvy, right? It's with the sommeliers, it's with the snooty restaurants in Santa Fe. It's getting the wine buyers and the people who have experienced wines from all over. Maybe they tasted our wines 10, 15 years ago and they are unwilling. So we've got to do a lot of work internally to build up some, what I call it, a little Vino vanity for New
Yeah.
Mexico, because that's the kind you need a little edge, a little chip on the shoulder. And I think if we could push that with our local restaurateurs to really see the value in having by the glass New Mexico wine at
Yeah.
every single place that you go. When you show up here, you're going to say, "Where's the wine?" if it's not on the wine list.
Yeah.
So there's definitely always something that needs to happen that continues to push the stone up the hill. But as I keep thinking about how, in some places wine industries get very entrenched, right? You just kind of sink into the habits or the way we've always done things. And, in New Mexico, we're actually kind of circling back to things that we've done hundreds of years ago, right? We're
Yeah.
working with Native American tribes to plant grapes. So I think one of a few places where tribal entities grow for the industry. So I think there's a lot that we can do, a lot we still have to do, but it's folks like Wine Industry Network and Wine Business Monthly. I mean, we've had some great journalists out here, Deborah
Yeah.
Parker Wong and W. Blake Gray, Andrew Chalk. These people have come out and everyone's curious. And I think
Yeah.
if we can leverage curiosity and then meet that with surprise and delight, we're right where we need to be.
So that's a really good segue to the last question I want to ask you. And when you close your eyes and you imagine New Mexico wine industry 10 years from now, what does success look like to you?
Me being retired is one of these
I
major
don't think they're going to
goals.
let you get retired. I think you're probably
Yeah,
stuck.
maybe I'll just have to start a winery and then I can be a board member. But I'll let you talk me out of that. I think if, my goals personally are to use the crescendo of the 400th anniversary to be that springboard that catapults the industry forward. You've heard me say many times 50 wineries, and for a lot of your viewers, 50 wineries is going to sound like a cottage industry, or maybe even just like Dry Creek Road.
Yeah.
So we have to do a better job. And what I'll be working on in the next year is a business recruitment strategy and incentives to incubate and to start up wines using opportunity zones. So I think we need to double the size of our industry and get over 100 wineries. I'd love to continue to plant grapes in a thoughtful, conscientious way so that we are water wise, but we also maintain the authenticity of our product. Right now, 90% of the wineries in our state use 100% New Mexico grapes. And we can't blame Grape for having to import for their 400,000 cases. We have 1,200 acres of grapes, right? So it's increased plantings. It's doubling the size of the industry and getting that export market moving forward. I would love for New Mexico to become renowned for sparkling wines. And if I could really give us that leg up rather than try to pick a signature grape or a signature style,
Yeah.
lean into bubbles, lean into something that's celebratory. So for our 400th anniversary, we're going to pop a lot of corks for sure. And so I think that's one area where we have already proven ourselves successful. And I think we have a lot of opportunity in that zone. And so I'm going to lean heavily into encouraging all of our wineries to participate in our sparkling boot camp and really pick up on the méthode traditionnelle, the méthode champenoise
Yeah.
that we have established here. So, that'd be a great, if you flew into New Mexico, you got out of a plane and you saw at the turnstile grapes and vineyards, then you started driving down the road. We don't have highway road signage for wineries yet. So
Okay.
one of my big things between now and the 400th is I've got to get wayfinding, road signage. But you get your rental car and you start driving down the street and you see vineyards, you see wineries. Hey, we succeeded, right? That's that's my recipe. That's what I hope for.
Well, I think it's going to be great. I'm really happy for you. I'm glad you're having the success that you've already had. I think there's going to be more to come. I think, the Vintage 400 is going to be unbelievable. I know that you're going to throw some great parties. It's going to be good. I'm coming. I'm definitely coming down there. And I appreciate you being here with us today.
Thanks, George. I love the way that this industry continues to build up people around it. You lift people up and you pull them up from behind and you push them forward. And you've always been a champion and a great help. But I look at Wine America, the folks at the Wine Institute,
Yeah.
just the very different folks that I have met along the way that have just encouraged me, when they hear audacious, crazy ideas and they go, well, go ahead, do it, give it a shot, and so the encouragement is there. I think we've got, we need to write the next chapter of American wine history,
Yeah.
broad-based, right? We need to be in charge of that narrative. And I think if we take control of that, we win. And if we let it be written for us, we lose. So I just challenge everybody who's here, if little old New Mexico can pull it off, you damn well know you can,
You're so motivating. All right. So, Chris, for anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about, the events that you're putting on or how to get a hold of you, what should they do?
So nmwine.com is our website. NM Wine Studio is our tasting room. Got a new website coming up in May with a bunch new information there. Yeah, and then our annual festivals are Memorial Day and Labor Day every year for 40 years. So we invite everybody to come out to New Mexico and find yourself enchanted. And yeah, I hope to hear from folks, but I hope to hear from you as well. Thanks,
Well,
George.
good. Well, thanks for your time. Thanks for everybody who tuned in today. Stay tuned, continue to tune in, like our YouTube channel, and Viva Vino.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, man.